Good evening. I'm Scott Binsack, and thank you for joining me. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing the peace within, battling the depths of depression. Depression is now a world epidemic, a debilitating illness. 1 in every 6 Americans suffer it. 1 in 6. And each generation it gets worse. Yes, each generation. This is a subject I take very seriously because I have suffered from severe depression since in my early 20s when it showed its ugly face. And thereafter, after a near fatal auto accident where I suffered severe brain swelling. I am depressed. Is that true? People say they're depressed all the time when they start to have feelings of sadness, despair, lack of hope. Things aren't going their way. Really, those feelings may or may not be depression. People ask, what really is depression? Depression, now as clinical studies have showed, and I have followed this for many years because I self-helped myself through severe depression at times. Depression brings on feelings of loneliness, worthlessness, being ashamed, helpless, feeling like there's no out. There's no way out of the box. There's no way out of the well to see the light. You feel insufficient. You have no energy. It's accumulation of several different types of feelings. I can remember when I first started feeling depressed. As I've discussed in other shows, I had a severe traumatic childhood. Homeless at 16, in my own company by 18. And I learned how to take my debilitating and traumatizing childhood and flip it into positive energy. And I thought, okay, I beat it. I beat my childhood. I beat the pains. I beat the trauma. And then, more successful I got, the more empty I got. The more insufficient I felt. And at different times, certain triggers would raise red flags within me, triggering matters from my childhood. So I thought that's what was causing it, me not facing those issues. And I talked to psychologists, psychiatrists, and when in fact I was really becoming manically depressed. And in 1994, I happened to be in Costa Rica at a hotel called Hotel Herradura. It's in San Jose. And I can remember I had actually gone down there and I was doing business down there and eventually got a home down there. But I can remember the main reason why I went down there to begin with was for business, but it was sort of I was running away from the successes I had and issues I had starting to go through a separation and divorce with my wife, learning my son wasn't my son. So when you have all these debilitating effects in life, it will begin to trigger depression. And I can remember I was ready to walk out the hotel entrance, and I collapsed. I collapsed. I had a nervous breakdown, actually, and I had felt it coming on starting 6 months before. And I'm man enough to say it. I'm very real. I had a severe nervous breakdown. I ended up in the hospital in San Jose, not in the psych ward or anything, just the regular hospital, and the doctor actually did a CAT scan on my brain, strangely enough, and CAT scans had just started, 1994. And the doctor came in to me and he said, have you ever done cocaine? And I said, I looked at him and I didn't know what to say. I was kind of ashamed. And I said, yes, when I was younger, I was force-fed cocaine since the age of basically 5. And he showed me, and he highlighted the CAT scan, and he showed my brain as the damage from that cocaine, and as well as severe inflammation in my brain. And I'm using the word inflammation because it's amazing how what the story I'm telling you comes into play with recent studies, top studies of the causes of depression. So I said yes, and he said, do you suffer anxiety? And a combination anxiety and depression. A combination anxiety, my mind would race, couldn't sleep, thoughts, fears, and I buried it with success. And at one time I was burying it with alcohol when I was younger, heavily. And this is the first time I started taking and trying medications. And they put me on Xanax, which is a benzodiazepine, very addictive, as well as Paxil. And Paxil never sat right with me. So now I have all this he's giving me these pills, and I don't like taking pills. I'm not a pill person. I don't like to not be in control of myself or thought. And I have to be very honest, taking a pill made me feel like, okay, people are going to say I'm crazy when I just have anxiety and depression. I looked down on it, and I didn't think it was doing much for me. Now the Xanax, yes, it calmed me, things like that. However, you wanted to just do anything to shut off these horrible feelings. And I know millions of people suffer this. Those horrible feelings of despair, no hope, and suicidal at times, and death. Do you know over 1 million people die from suicide in the United States alone every year? 1 million. Let's not even talk about the world, because I'm sure it's millions and millions if I looked at the statistics. One in 4 people by the age of 75 will have suffered depression and or been on some type of medication. It's like 1 in 4 people, no, I'm sorry, 1 in 9 people now are on some type of medication, and even children. And the studies have shown that depression rates of younger people have skyrocketed. From generation to generation, it gets higher and higher. So I start taking these medicines, and some of the feelings start to go away. And I go back to work, I go back to New York and Long Island and go on with my life. I still couldn't beat it. I still couldn't beat it. No matter what I did, it would show its face. And I'm sure if you suffer depression, you know that it's not constant all the time. And if it does get constant, meaning there's some good days, some bad days, and then it shows its ugly face, and there you are. And it becomes very dangerous at times if it becomes suicidal. And believe it or not, if depression remains in the brain, meaning constant, it's brain damaging to the brain itself, the cerebral cortex. And I know I'm getting into some words here. I like to keep things simple and real. But depression works on the serotonin level in the brain. So if your serotonin is up and down, as does anxiety, 1 minute you're depressed, 1 minute you're not, 1 minute you're up. And they've come out with all these medications and Prozac and this and that to try to stabilize the dopamine. So Now, let's fast forward now to 1996. So for 2 years, I'm suffering this horrible depression, on and off, trying to fight it in any ways that I could. And I'm a very big self-help person. I've self-helped myself. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it. Or I'll talk to professionals as well, but I like to do my own research, and I like to find the strength within myself because I believe the mind is that powerful, and I've learned that over the years now that I'm going to be 45 in a month. I wanted that shut-off switch to go turn itself off in my brain, to not feel these horrible feelings. And I'm a very free-spirited person with lots of energy, and I'm happy. When I was not depressed, I was always happy, as I am now. And that's not to say we're not supposed to feel normal feelings of sadness or pain, or those are all normal. That doesn't make you depressed. That makes you experiencing feelings. They're normal. So, but as I said, depression can become toxic. Toxic. And I'm going to share with you how I defeated this depression. So in 1996, my marriage was getting to the point where it was definite divorce. It was horrible. My business, I was very, very successful. I couldn't, and I wanted more and more and more and more. That wasn't making me happy, and that wasn't fixing my depression. And anybody knows, and I'll say it on here, all the money in the world is not going to bring you happiness. And part of the reason why I'm doing this show is because I want to help others and explain some of the reasons, how the techniques I used to overcome it, and how I still daily overcome it, as well as because of what happened with Robin Williams. That was very, very tragic. A man who made millions smile, and everybody on the outside, he had it all, but fought this demon within inside of him on a regular basis, as well as substance abuse, which goes with depression, because people who have chronic depression will use, they self-medicate themselves with, it could be marijuana, it could be cocaine, it could be alcohol, combination of all of those. They use anything to self-medicate themselves to get rid of that horrible, horrible feeling. They want to get rid of that feeling. And I understand it, and that's where even suicide comes in. And that's when it becomes toxic. When you feel that there's no hope in anything, and you turn to suicide or attempt suicide, where it's basically a cry for help from within. It's a cry for attention, for somebody to stop those horrible, horrible demons, as I call them. And I call them that because they are the feeling of unworthiness, insufficient, no desire. I mean, feeling ashamed and worthless, guilt. I mean, it's horrible feelings. So fast forward to 96, and I'm back in Costa Rica again. And I'm at my home, which is basically out in the middle of nowhere, 20 miles from the Nicaraguan border on the Pacific Ocean near Jaco Beach. And I'm there with my wife trying to amend our marriage. Why? I knew it was doomed from the beginning. We got married for the wrong reason. She said she was pregnant, when in fact it wasn't even my child. I found out later on, as I discussed in other shows. But I tried. I felt that I had a wrong outlook on love at the time, as I've discussed in other shows as well. So here I am, and I was always trying to get her attention. I was always trying to get her love, and I never had it. She was there for the money. She was there for the ride. And I can remember feeling such despair. My children were there. My oldest son, Scott, who I found out was not mine, and my son, Derek. And Derek was only 3 years old. Scotty was 6. And the despair was horrible. And as I said, I'm out in the middle of the basically middle of nowhere. And I, I used to carry a 9mm all the time. I had it on me because of money, because of business outside the country. It was not safe at the time that there was kidnappings in Costa Rica and all kinds of stuff between Nicaragua, etc. So I can remember when it hit the critical stage. And I kept trying and reaching out to help to my ex-wife, and she paid me no attention. And cell phones from where I was at the time was not happening. And I remember going in and kissing my children and saying goodnight to them. And I can remember just weeping. And the depression was so bad. It was horrible. I just wanted it to stop. I felt hopeless. There was situations going on at home, and as I discussed, and other things with the New York mob, and my business was it grew so tremendous. I mean, we're up to $15 million a year, and I was in my 20s, and I felt overwhelmed and unloved, and that all stemmed from my childhood as well. So I went out on my porch, and my house is up on pilings overlooking the ocean there, and I looked up, and I said my piece to God, and then I went down, and I got in my truck and just sat there, turned it on, and I put the gun in my mouth. I was so close to pulling that trigger. God, I was so close to pulling that trigger. It took all the strength inside of me to not do it. To not do it. It took everything inside of me, and I kept self-talking myself out of it. Maybe for an hour, I sat there. In, out, in, out. Crying, my life, flashing my life before my eyes, thinking I had no purpose in the world. Finally, again, as I've done many, many times in my life in very horrible situations as a child, I pulled myself out of it by self-talking to myself and saying that there's more to this than life. And I kept thinking of my children and what a coward I would be if I did this, and I'm not a coward. But that depression was there. It was like I just wanted it to stop. I wanted those horrible feelings to stop. So I ended up getting out of my car, and I actually just fired the whole clip of my gun up and out into there's nobody there. It's in the middle of nowhere. And I just kept firing it, firing it, firing it. And I said, you know what, to myself, I said, it's time to go home. Meaning back to Long Island. It's time to go home. It was time to stop running. And it was time to face this depression head on. So I went home, and I started doing as much research as I could, and that's how I've always done anything in my life. Even in business, when I needed an answer, I went and sought it out. And I still battled. I was still taking these medicines, and I kept thinking that this Paxil was not right for me, because every time I took the pill, I felt more depressed, believe it or not. And now, in studies, Paxil in adults, if taken in too higher doses, will cause suicidal thoughts. As I said to myself, I'm not, this is not me. I kept saying, this is not me, this is not me, this is not me. And I couldn't talk to my wife about it, soon to be ex-wife. I didn't have many, I kept my circle small. My family had abandoned me when I was younger. And now that I was rich, they wanted back in. And I let a few of them back in, only to again be stabbed in the back. A lot was going on in my life. Big responsibilities. And the more successful you get, the more responsibilities you have. And money's not going to change the depression. Money's not going to Success is not going to change this killer illness, and it's debilitating if you allow it to be. If you allow it to be. And I'm not one to allow anything to debilitate me, even at my worst. So I started to do research, and at that time, you kept hearing about dopamine and exercise and diet, and that depression was a defect in the dopamine levels in the brain. I'm like, great, my childhood, this childhood and being fed drugs or something I got from my family that was already beyond, excuse me, fucked up. I got something else inherited. So I started to let that get to me. And I kept fighting this, and at times it got bad again. It got real bad again. And then in 1999, I had a near fatal auto accident, as I talk about in many of my shows, but especially in the one Seeing Heaven and Hell, where my truck went off a 400-foot cliff in a snowstorm, and I got ejected through the front windshield, and my face hit the road down below. My head took the whole impact. I actually have 40 some odd plates in my prosthetic plates in my face. My lip was in 8 places. Major scars, but I've had tons of CO2 laser surgery by a wonderful doctor. But when I woke up from that coma, the next 2 years of my life were the worst. I survived death. I died on the operating table. I saw death. I survived it and woke up in the fires of hell. And my depression was not bad. It was severe. It was manic. And again, once you're in that space and you're so depressed and you're at that level, you can't just say, okay, let's pull up my bootstraps and let's do this. You need help. So now I'm going to fast forward now to the current studies, and then I'm going to get back to my story from right after this auto accident from the head injury. The newest studies show that inflammation of the brain and inflammation of the body anywhere is a major cause. Well, people say diabetes causes inflammation. We can go down the line. But inflammation is also a cause of depression in the brain. Now, my brain was swollen so bad, the doctors had told me after CAT scans that it would take years for the inflammation to go down, sometimes 2 years or longer. Again, they throw me on all these medications and all these things, and I'm like, this is making me worse. I hated those medications. Hated them. Because I didn't feel myself. I felt out of my skin all the time. And here I am running businesses and going on my daily life and doing anything I could, because when I worked and I put my mind to something, depression was gone. So I kept thinking to myself, wait a second, I'm at work. If I'm doing something, if I'm working with my hands and doing what I love and doing all these things that I love to do, and my mind is preoccupied, I don't have the depressive thoughts. So I slowly took myself off the medications. And I stayed on the Paxil back then. And in the lower doses. I mean, I think it was 10 milligrams a day. So I started to turn to do lifestyle changes. I started to do things and activities that would take my focus off of being depressed. And I then took up exercise. And I know and did research on that as well. Exercise is the #1 thing for the body. The problem is humans are not in the mind, don't want to exercise. The brain does not want to exercise. We come from a hunter style from centuries of just going out and doing physical labor and going out and working our bodies, not getting on a treadmill and or that's why lifting weights even increases dopamine more than normal exercise. They have done recent studies that show exercise was better than Zoloft, one of the antidepressant medications. 30 minutes of walking 3 days a week in long-term studies worked more efficient than Zoloft medication. I have the numbers right here. Head-to-head against Zoloft. So I started to do these changes in my life. And I started to eat better. And in my research, I found that they said omega-3 fatty acids, which is the brain is made up of fatty acids. A lot of people don't know this. Sunlight. I always felt great when I laid in the sun. I'm a beach person, and I always felt I didn't feel depressed when I laid in the sun. So I started to do more of that. I started to do all these different things, anything to get rid of these toxic feelings, but especially exercising and eating differently and changing my thought patterns. Because once you're in such a deep state, as I said, you have to slowly take the steps to pull yourself out of it. Small steps. And if you're in a toxic state and you feel suicidal, reach out to anybody. Hotlines even, and I'm listing one with this blog, with the show at the bottom. Because depression is false impression, this is what I call it. But it's a false impression of the mind. You believe that you're lonely and you're worthless and you're ashamed and you feel hopeless and unworthy and you have no energy to work, no desire to move forward. None of these things. But that's projected like a movie onto the brain. And with the dopamine levels. And dopamine is naturally produced in our bodies. But the strange thing is that new studies show that each generation it's getting worse. Why? We as humans are exercising less, doing less physical of anything because everything is at in front of us on the screen. This, texting, screen, this, that. Everything's easy for us to do. You don't have to physically do much today. But physical activity is key to maintaining a healthy mindset with depression and overcoming it. And now you can do PET scans and MRIs that'll show a depressed brain and a healthy brain and the colors. It's amazing. And when you exercise and when you change your diet and do more positive things in your life, social interaction is one of the key things as well. And if you get a pad and a pen, write these down because I'm going to go through them because they're so key. And listen to what I'm telling you. I have overcome severe depression. I haven't had it for many, many years. Once in a blue moon, it'll show its ugly face, and I'll pull myself right back out of it when I know the signs of it. And I sense them. I know them well. Because, and as I was saying, socially, we as humans are meant to interact with each other, not a screen. So social interaction is huge to a healthy lifestyle to fight depression. You must interact with other people, not hide behind a computer screen as it has been for a long time now for us, and it's getting worse. Young people are more depressed than ever. Young people, there's 1 in 4 children on antidepressants as doctors just throw them out there for anxiety and depression. Here, take this, take this, take this, take this. That'll cure you. That'll help you. That'll fix the problem. Instead of, as I've always said, we have the power within us. And I'm going to get into another state of where I nearly took my own life. And I'm man enough to tell this to the world because I have nothing to hide and I'm real and I'm not ashamed of any of this because depression is an illness. And my auto accident sent me for a loop. My auto accident, severe brain trauma, and I shouldn't have been here and I got a second chance. But it sent me through a loop. A lot of things happened in my life after that. And I'm going to be sharing those as well. My book's coming out soon. And I can't wait to tell the world my story. Because I want to help others and I want people to know what I suffered as well as what I succeeded at and how they can do it as well and not to make the same mistakes. Our whole lifestyle, and the biggest key, and I have to say this, the biggest key is the stressors in our life. The stress that we are under, the body can only take so much stress. And I know I've been in the stress we put ourselves through in everyday life with the lifestyle that we have come to create here in not just the world, but especially America, is tremendous. And stress on the body causes inflammation of the whole body, of the brain, everything. Stress is like your brain going on overload. And then you can only take so much. The brain can only take so much. And then it collapses. And then it says, what the, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I can remember after my auto accident, I was released from the hospital 3 weeks. After 3 weeks after the hospital, I sent the nurse home. And I was by myself. And I unknowingly got on the phone, got a ticket, an airline ticket to my condo in Antigua at the time. And drove myself to Newark Airport. I had a trach in my throat, stitches in my head, bars in my mouth. I actually took a wire cutter and cut the bars out of my mouth that were all here. Really, the bars were holding all of this work that they did. And if it wasn't for the ENT that did all the work, a doctor that is just I owe my life to, and he revived me when I died on the table. I got on this plane and traveled to Antigua. Ended up in my condo, gun, and I was 20. This is 1999, so I was 26. I got someone locally. I ended up with a pile of cocaine in front of me. Hadn't touched it since I was a younger kid. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and I only remember what I'm telling you because this was told to me after, and I realized it, and I'm going to get to that. And I just wanted to die. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. I just wanted to die. My head was scarred. My face was swollen. I had no idea what I was thinking. I had no idea what I was doing. Depression was so bad, I would have jumped off a building if I had the opportunity just to stop it. And that's how you feel when you get manically depressed, that there is no hope, that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. And I can remember a knock on the door. This part I remember, and it was a friend of mine in Antigua, and another one of them who's on my Facebook wall, who can vouch for this story, was a security of mine, a police officer in Antigua, because I always had security when I was in Antigua, and he became my personal friend. They found me there, and they were like, Scott, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he says, look, and he's pointing at my face and my trach, and I went into the bathroom mirror and I looked, and I was like, it was like, I was brought back to reality there. I was like, what am I doing here? How did I even get here? And they were like, Scott, man, this is crazy. This is not you. What's going on? And then I explained about the auto accident, and then I had just started to get myself back learning who I was. I didn't even remember my name after that auto accident, my birth date, and people. It was horrible, tragedy, traumatic for me. and I wasn't myself at all. And my brain was swollen. So I was taken to the local hospital, and believe it or not, I had another CAT scan. And this doctor, before was put on a plane back home, and I even had a special envoy, so to speak, to get me safely on that plane. And when I arrived, believe it or not, because I was medically a mess, not just from the head trauma, but from everything that was just going on. And I can remember the distraught feelings. They just wouldn't go away. They just would not go away. I finally woke up one morning thereafter, and then I started suffering through this other whole traumatic event that was like a chain reaction of just events that went from one thing to the other. And it was in an area of Pennsylvania that brought me to a certain point in my life that I'm doing a special show about, shocking events. And the depression was just, I couldn't get around it. I couldn't get around it. I kept finally, I really don't honestly know what it took, but it finally, I started to focus on myself. I looked in the mirror and I said, Scott, you have to get out of this. You have to get out of this. This is not who you are. You're not a depressed. This is not who you are. You're a positive man. You are a successful man. You've made some mistakes. You've had some failures. It's okay. And I truthfully, I'm looking you, all of you. I began to exercise hard. I used to work out all the time for years from that moment on. I started to eat right. I started to read every book I could on depression and anxiety, and I still stayed on this medicine pact. A few years later, well, I shouldn't say few, many years later, in 2007, I learned that I was basically having adverse effects to Paxil the whole time, causing some serious thoughts, and I stopped the Paxil. And I continued doing the physical activities, the diet, always tried to get sun, always tried to work and do positive things. And I wrote my goals down, and I focused on the positive. And slowly it changed. My lifestyle changed. Even though I was suffering through things, I still kept my lifestyle, for me, in check with becoming positive. And we'll say from 2000 on, I slowly began to do this. Now it's 2014, and I don't suffer depression anymore. Some days I get down, I feel sad like everybody else, but it's not that manic, hopeless feeling, and it hasn't been that way for many, many, many years. And I say this to you, you can deal with this depression, and it is good to see a doctor, a psychologist, psychiatrist, even your general MD, to get you there if you're feeling these depressive thoughts. But I don't believe medicine is the complete key to healing in depression. Can it get you the right medicine when they find it to raise the dopamine? And these are all test medicines. But like they've done with clinical studies, they can give you a sugar pill or an antidepressant pill, and believe it or not, the positive effects of someone just thinking they're taking the medicine when they're really not lifted them out of the depression. As I said, the mind is a powerful thing. And depression will keep, it's a mood disorder, and it robs people of their life if they allow it to. You don't want to allow it to rob you of your life. You need to take control of it. And you can do it. Anyone can do it. And if the way our society is now, you have got to change your entire lifestyle to not be in a computer all the time, to not be, you want to socially interact with people. You want to exercise. As I said, 3 30-minute walks a week beat Zoloft in trials, and I believe it. When I was weightlifting, I mean heavily weightlifting on a regular basis, I felt like I was on top of the world for years, and it didn't change as long as I exercised, and it never. I basically tricked my mind and raised the dopamine level, and dopamine exercise is so powerful, but we don't do it anymore. We don't do it anymore, and we don't like to exercise. As trials have even showed, you put a lab rat in a strap on a treadmill, it just stops. It doesn't want to exercise. It's strange, believe it or not, but yet you see them in a hamster wheel going around and around and around and around and around and around and around. But when it sees it, and we see it, like we look at a treadmill or we look at weights, or we look at it, and you're like, ugh, I don't want to do that. If the brain actually shuts it. But we're not exercising in our lives, a lot of us. Unless you're living in a city and you have to walk to work every day or ride your bicycle or doing these things, these are all healthy things for you. But the stresses of our environment alone and the garbage food that we eat are key to not eating a healthy diet full of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. I'm telling you is key. Using the even supplements to get it if you're not eating the food, but eating fast food and sugars. And I know I torture myself with that garbage. I'm a big energy drink user. I got people all the time, stop drinking, and they're right. But I take tons of supplements, and I have very big. I haven't been at the gym in about 3 months, and I'm starting to notice it now. And I don't mean just so much with my body, but mentally. I have to start. I've been working so much, which is physical exercise. I do a lot of physical work and building and even consulting and whatever. You have got to do these things. So I'm going to go through them. You need to do your physical activity. You have to. Even if you just walk a few times a week, do it. And if you're not able to walk, some people cannot do, then, I mean, you have to do some type of physical activity. You want to change your diet. Trust what I tell you, change your diet. You want sunlight. Don't stop listening to all these things about cancer and sun. And the sun is one of the most healthiest things for the body. The sun wasn't just put there to warm our planet. We get vitamin D from it. We get tons and tons of resources from it as the human body. You want to get healthy sleep. That's another thing. I'm a night person. I'm like nocturnal. But I have to get 4 to 5 hours of sleep. They say recommended healthy is much more than a few hours more than that, but I'm a 4 to 5 hour person. But even then, I'll have to crash. I can go a week of that, and I have to crash and get 8 hours of sleep, 8, even sometimes 10, because my body just can't take the stresses, and I have to allow it to sleep. You have to allow your body to rest. And I know we get in this rat race, and we have to do all these things, and our mind keeps going. You lay down, you can't go to sleep, you can't do. You have to take control of your life. You have to take control of your life, because society's not going to do it for you. And if you allow society to run your life, you're going to end up very unhealthy in your body with many things: cancer, depression, you get diabetes. It's endless. That goes with your diet as well. The obesity rates are horrible. Those people are depressed too, because they look in the mirror, they feel depressed. Why am I fat? Why am I this? You have to change your way, and if you have to get to a doctor, see a therapist and a psychiatrist to go over your things, and don't let them just throw medicine at you, but you can use the medicine to get yourself out of the deeper hole that you're in. And then as you lift yourself up, you change, you start to exercise, you change your diet, you get more sun, interact with people, be social. Be social with people. Don't just talk to them on the computer. What's called FaceTime is a key to dealing with depression. FaceTime. We are human beings. We're meant to interact with each other. We are meant to have FaceTime one-on-one with each other. that is key. That's the social connection part. And you want to have activity in your life. Go to the movies, go miniature golfing, go to an amusement park, go to the beach, go to the city shopping, do things that you can do that bring you outside into the world. Go on vacation. And I know some people can't do that every day. My point is you you have to change your lifestyle. You have to pull yourself from the rat race. And even if you can't afford to do some of the other outside social things, you can still exercise. Anybody can walk. Anyone can do push-ups and calisthenics and things like that. Anybody can. You can change what you stick in your mouth. You can change your diet. You can socialize with people more than sticking your face in the computer. This is what I see all day today. And I'm just as fault, but I take time out of my day not to. And I'm a very big social media person, as you all know. I love social media. But one thing that I love more is my me time, my exercising, my one-on-one with people and interacting with people, eating a good meal. I take my supplements every day and I use good supplements. Don't feed into a lot of the garbage that is fed to you on the internet as well about taking this and this and this. Do your homework on things. You can beat depression. You can beat the anxiety. But you have to make the choice in your life to do it. You have to stop feeling hopeless. And I know that's better said than done. It's harder said. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do, but you can do it. Trust me, I did it. And I was very manically depressed for a long time. And then I suffered some severe chain reaction of events. I could have lost my life. I lost I call it the fall from grace. It was a huge wake-up call for me. And through that, at times, there was some serious depression, but I beat that too. And as I'm saying, changing exercise out of all of this is the key. Sunlight, getting outside of your home. And if you feel suicidal, don't do it. Don't do it. I feel for Robin Williams and his family. The man had it all. But the problem is with depression, you don't see that. The brain tricks you into seeing something else. The fears aren't real. And again, it all goes back to fear. And I did a show on fear. Fear is manifested in our own brains, in our own mind. You have the fight or flight in you, which is normal instinct to like fire or harm. But that the fear of running away and the fear of is in your mind. Fear is manifested in our minds. And I say this to anybody. If you ever need anyone to talk to, you're feeling depressed, you message me. You message me and I'll message you back. I'll be happy to talk to you. Because it's not worth it. Suicide is not worth it. There's so much to life, no matter what you're suffering. And I've suffered some severe hardships, a lot in my own mistakes and my own costs to myself. And I'm so relieved to be myself now. And I don't care what anybody thinks. It's the best feeling in the world. And I don't have the depression. I'm happy most of the time. And you get normal reactions to death, or someone gets hurt, or you lose an animal, a pet, or you lose a loved one. You're going to feel sad and all these things. Those are normal emotions. Don't confuse them with depression. If you allow the depression, positive thinking is key as well. And again, there's a hotline I'm putting on here if you feel depressed. And as I said, just use Robin Williams as an example of a man who had everything, and he was so wonderful to the world. He made so many people smile. But he was fighting a battle with demons within himself. You never know what someone's going through when you look at them. They could look like they're the happiest people in the world, but you never really know what they're going through. So don't judge them. You have no idea what path they walk to get there or what demons they're battling. Good night and God bless.